Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. For those that you don't know me, I'm Andrea Brown. I'm the Chief Executive of the National Kidney Federation. Please keep your microphones on mute and type in any questions that you might have while the presentation's going on in the chat box that's at the bottom. The meeting's been recorded and will be displayed on the NKF website and the YouTube channel for future viewing. So please welcome Sharon Byrne and Margaret Eyre. Over to you, Sharon and Margaret.
Hi, welcome this evening. I hope you can hear me. I've been told to talk up, so I apologise if you can only just hear me. So my name's Sharon. I am a renal counsellor based at Kent and Canterbury Hospital, which is part of the East Kent Hospital University Foundation Trust. And I'm very aware that at our trust, what we have as a service isn't necessarily what you may have as a service where you are. So our trust, we're very lucky. So we have 2 full-time renal counsellors, which cover 7 of our sites, East and West Kent, as well as a care navigator. And also, as part of our counselling service, with the help of our Kent Kidney Patient Association, not only do we offer counselling, but we also offer a support group. So kind of that's where I am. And I'll pass you over to Margaret. You're on mute, Margaret.
Sorry, try again. Hello, it's really good to be with everybody this evening. My name's Margaret Eyre. I'm one of the 2 renal social workers based at York Hospital. We've got 52 hours between us, so we're both part-time, but our area has expanded. We'd cover right up to Scarborough now and the Harrogate area, so it's a big geographical area. Also in our service, we have 2 part-time psychologists, very part-time. We don't have counsellors, we have psychologists instead, but we work well together. We've got a renal physio as well and do a lot of work with her in the wellbeing side. And we've got a peer support programme, which is in its infancy, but again, we work, it's all, so, you know, try to have a joined up service and work well together and do the best we can for our patients with our resources. So thanks very much.
Yes, so thank you for coming, and as you are aware, it's being recorded, so you can re-listen if you miss some bits, but also be aware you can ask questions at the end, and we're happy to answer those. And we just hope at the end of this kind of talk that you'll be a bit more aware of what renal counselling and renal social work is all about and how we can support you. As I said, please bear in mind that not all trusts provide the same service. So bear with me and I shall share my screen. Okay, so as you can see, it's all about help. I need somebody help, and we recognise that, you know, our service is very specialised, so it's not just anybody that can help. So hopefully at the end of today, you'll realise why a specialist renal counsellor and a specialist renal social worker is important for our services. So what is psychosocial support? Psychosocial support is all about the psychological and the social side of support. So recognising that kidney disease isn't just affecting the physical well-being, it's also affecting your mental health, your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, and they in turn will impact on relationships and your behaviour. So, you know, renal counselling is all about supporting that part of you. So the medical side can look at the physical health, and we're going to help look at the mental, emotional side.
Yeah, and we work in a very holistic way as renal social workers as well. There are a lot of people who feel that they maybe don't want to speak to a counsellor or a psychologist, so they come to us. We'll quite often be asked to help with practical things like benefits or even a car badge or something like that. And then once you get talking to the person, you realise there's lots of other issues. And so we give a sort of lower level emotional support as well. And then we'll also refer people onto our psychologists and other services once we've built up their trust. And as I was saying earlier, we have a peer support program, so we can refer them to other people in a similar position who may understand their needs better than we do.
So again, so kind of creating that holistic approach. So the medical side, the psychological side, and the social side, recognizing it all comes together, and you can't separate them, but you need all of that to help get through what's going on for you. So here at Kent and Canterbury, you can access the renal counselling service anywhere along the renal journey. So from the very beginning, when you first have a diagnosis, to when it comes to that moment in time when you have to think about what renal replacement therapy you would like to choose and which one will be better for you. And also as you recognise as you're going through this, that actually maybe you as a person are changing, and that there are times when you're really maybe struggling with what's going on and it all becomes too much, then, you know, turn to the counselling side of things, have that space to explore what's going on for you. And we also recognise that it's not just the person that's going through this, that family members are also affected. You know, it has that ripple effect of everybody around you is impacted by kidney disease, and they may need support too. So at Kent and Canterbury, our counselling service is open to patients, but family members too. And then as you go through your journey, you may go from one form of replacement therapy to another. Or if you become unhappy with one form, you may want to change. But how do you do that? And what is going on for you? So counselling is an opportunity to explore that too. And sometimes when it gets to the point where you're feeling that there is no quality of life, what is the point? That they're really, you know, you've really come to the end and that there doesn't seem to be any other option but to withdraw. Then again, talking it through with counselling, you know, just exploring, can you carry on? Is there another way of doing it? Or is the time now to kind of let go? And it's a time that, you know, in counselling, because it is specifically for you, it's confidential, it's a time that you can open up and not, that maybe will be difficult to talk to family members about. So it's that kind of space for you to decide what's the best thing for you. And then, you know, as in life, there comes a loss. So we also offer our services to people that have lost their loved ones. So recognizing that how devastating that is, but the support continues. So as we said at the beginning, that whole holistic feel. Our service is here from the very beginning all the way through to the end and beyond. That diagnosis, suddenly getting that diagnosis that you have a kidney condition, that your kidney is failing, that kind of shock, that realization that life is going to change can be so overwhelming. It can, you know, that feeling of being alone, that this is just too much to bear. How can you go forward? What is life going to be like? You know, how can you talk that through with family members if you've got family members, and how are they going to cope with this? So that kind of, from the very beginning of hearing that news, counselling is an opportunity to kind of let out some of those feelings, some of those thoughts. And even if it is, you know, it's not a sudden shock in that you've known for a long time because you've had your kidney condition for years, but the realization when the kidneys are failing and you have to make a decision and it suddenly becomes real that you're needing some help, some additional medical input, but also some counselling can really be of support for you at this time. like I said, it can become quite overwhelming, that feeling that you're on your own, and which direction do you take? Which one is the right direction for you? What would you like to do? You know, the mind can be very good at kind of picking up on all the negative thoughts. So suddenly you have one thing that's not going right in your life, and suddenly everything in your life seems to be overwhelming. It all seems too much to cope with. You know, I often quite say that the brain is like Velcro for negative thinking, and that you have one thing and it just grows. But all the happy and positive things in your life, the brain can be like Teflon. They just come and they slide off. So with counselling, it's an opportunity to kind of explore, well, okay, this is one part of your life that maybe isn't going according to plan or how you thought it would go, but also looking at the rest of your life and how's that going to be, and what would you like to do? So then it comes to choosing which replacement therapy would you like to do? And it could be that all of these options are open to you, but it could be because of other conditions that you have that they're not all available. So you could be limited to what choices you have. But thinking about what choices you have, just exploring those in a space where, you know, you're not having to kind of think or worry about what family members can say, but you're just looking at what you're needing, is what counselling provides. And it's also about it opening up the communication with, you know, members of the team too. So as a counsellor, we, with your permission, we can also talk to other members of the team. If you have a question, we can ask that question for you, or we can help to, you know, guide you as to what each of these therapies mean for you. So a bit of education, a bit of help, but mainly it's time to explore which pathway is the right pathway for you. And it isn't an easy decision to make, and recognize it does affect, you know, not just you, but it does affect the family too.
So now we move on to have a look at what renal social workers do. This does vary. We work with children and with adults in different capacities, but I think this diagram gives a good overview of the broad range of areas that we cover. Like I say, we're there to give practical support. We've got at the top, we've got housing. So somebody may be in an unsuitable place due to reduced mobility. They might be in a flat with no lift. They might be in somewhere that's damp. They might need more support. So we'd help them apply for sheltered housing, or it might be too expensive for them to live there, or finally they might want to be nearer their family who could offer support. So that's one area. Another big area on the top left is to do with finances, and as I said earlier, we often start with that. If people are not able to work or have to reduce their hours, then that can put them in a difficult financial position. So we help people claim benefits, and we can also apply for grants on behalf of people as well. And then activities of daily living. We work with quite a lot of frail older people, and they might need a package of carers coming in, or we might need to refer them to occupational therapists for equipment to help them manage in their own home. Put legal issues, there's all kinds of areas that can encompass. One is the Equality Act, if people have problems with their employers and staying in work, having reasonable adjustments for their disability, or if they're a carer, immigration law, safeguarding, so all kind of areas like that. then social life down at the bottom, that's, as I said at the beginning, well-being is really important. So it's trying to help people maximize their quality of life. And I say we work with our physio, and like if somebody moves to sheltered housing, for instance, they can remain independent because they've got support on site. And we also can apply for grants for holidays. Haven't done many of them lately, but there's a few more coming up. I like applying for holiday grants because it makes me think of, you know, it's like a sort of second-hand going on the holiday yourself. But and then I've got mental health going round. I'm going anti-clockwise, I'm not sure why, but anyway, I am. So as Sharon has already said, you know, that this kidney disease can have a profound effect. And I mean, you'll know that because a lot of you are patients yourselves. I mean, we have a lot of people who are suffering from trauma that they might have had from past experiences, and then they've suddenly lost their health. And that can be on top of what they're already experiencing, people who've crash landed onto dialysis. But like I say, they might be reluctant at first to see a psychologist or a counsellor. So we can help with that and gently suggest it if we feel that would be the best for them. And then we've got caregiver, often, which we don't necessarily think of. The patient might be someone who's a carer for somebody else themselves. If they're an older person, they might care for their spouse, or they might have young children that, or children of any age, teenagers that they care for, and that can present its own problems. We have a young woman on dialysis who's got a child at nursery, and we've set up a direct payment to help with the cost of the nursery. You can get extra hours of free childcare if you work, but not if you go to dialysis, which seems really mean, because obviously she would give anything to be able to work. And then we also have, we get drawn into discussions about treatment, such as, I mean, if somebody's going to home dialysis, going to home hemo, for instance, we might be asked to help with practical matters there. And again, we can offer support to carers. And we do joint visits with the pre-dialysis nurses quite often. So we're in at the start, and we're also in at the end as well. If people withdraw from dialysis, we can help set up care and liaise with palliative care services and others. So I think I've just about finished that slide. So yeah, so this is the just really, I've talked about a lot of this. So the distinctive approach, the importance of having a specialist social worker. We do understand the effects of renal failure on patients and their families, so we can offer support from a, you know, that position of greater understanding than the sort of general social worker. We can help educate colleagues and family members as well. As I've said, we've got specialist knowledge of benefits, so we can help people apply and also help them increasingly challenge decisions where they're turned down for benefits, often because the DWP doesn't understand the implications of kidney disease. As I said before, we help with work-related issues. We offer support for carers and other family members. And again, our psychology service will see carers. So we can carry out carers assessments, but again, we can refer people on to the psychological support as well. I mentioned about rehousing already and charitable grants, and also assistance with issues related to frailty. I mean, we can carry out mental capacity assessments and set up care, and as I said earlier, liaising with colleagues to set up end-of-life care. I've just got a few little pictures here. There's a booklet we've produced locally, Carer's Guide to Living with Kidney Failure. And then on the bottom right, we did a story. It's one of our dialysis patients who had 2 young children at the time, and one of the nurses said she wanted a resource to help explain dialysis to the children. And so it was actually a student I had at the time who had an English degree, so it seemed appropriate. He wrote the story, and then one of our patients actually illustrated it. So that was a resource that we produced locally. So that just gives a very quick overview. And back to Sharon now.
Okay, so with the counselling then, it's recognising that, yes, it's a life-changing event, but also recognising the amount of loss that you may incur as you go along. And it's loss can be thought about in terms of, you know, loss of energy, as with kidney disease, that real drained feeling, that tiredness, that brain fog, recognising there's a loss of appetite, a loss of physical weight. It could also be a loss of independence. So recognising that you're having to rely more and more on the help of others, and just kind of how that feels for you. And I quite often hear people talking about being a burden, not wanting to be a burden on the family, but actually, you know, not being in a position to be able to do anything. So quite often talking about pacing yourself so that you pace your energy, so it's not all used in, you know, one go. But also thinking about, you know, if it was on the other foot, if it was your partner that was going through this, would you not be willing to help them? So sometimes it's about having a bit of compassion for yourself and allowing others to help. But also with regard to loss, you know, it could be that the kidney disease has come at a time in your life when you thought that you were going to be doing something else. So it's the loss of the life you were hoping to have. So, you know, I've worked with people that were, you know, having to start dialysis at a time when they were looking to retire and travel the world. And that's a real life-changing thing, isn't it? That what you were hoping to achieve can no longer be done. And it's just working through all of that and acknowledging how awful that is. But then looking at, you know, just recognizing the awfulness and being able to kind of work with that. And as I've said before, and as Margaret's, you know, mentioned as well, that it does affect the family. So it's not just you, it is the people around you. And, you know, for children to, you know, witness a parent going through this and witnessing the changes and not understanding and not able to make sense, there are some guides. So as Margaret said, that they have a booklet. We also have a booklet from Guy's St Thomas's Trust that explains the whole of kidney disease in child language. But it is about, how do you have those conversations? How do you talk to other members of your family to explain what's going on, so that they can understand? And I'm also aware that quite often I'm hearing people talk about always having to go over it, always having to retell their story, and how frustrating that is. And that's because kidney disease is just not in people's awareness. You know, it's not as well known as some other diseases. And to keep repeating yourself, like I said, is so frustrating. But recognizing that, you know, carers need support as well as, you know, individuals that are going through this as well. And counselling service is there for everybody. And then, as if that wasn't enough, so I'm sure, you know, having just spoke through all that loss that you're going to incur, which is awful enough, and then COVID comes along. So not only are you trying to manage the kidney disease and everything that you're feeling, but all of a sudden life is up in the air and there's so much uncertainty. You know, people were talking about having to come into dialysis 3 times a week when the government's saying to stay at home. Or, you know, being on dialysis and what safety measures are in place. You know, it was really scary time. and everybody was having to adjust. And then there was also that for people that have had a transplant, having to shield, being away, almost trapped in their own homes because they can't be with family. And the impact that has on mental health is quite devastating. And then when we were fortunate to have vaccines, then there's the whole thing of, is this safe? Is it okay? And kind of wanting to know more about that. And, we were lucky. Kidney Charity were able to come up with information. National Kidney Federation were able to provide leaflets. And, there were sources that you could go to get support. But recognizing that's just another of the things that you're having to work through.
Yes, so we had a very similar experience, not surprisingly, during COVID. I've broken it down into 6 main areas of involvement. I mean, first of all, as ever, I think practical issues. We had a lot of queries about, how do I get my shopping? I'm not to go out. So we've helped organise signing people up to local support services, organising food parcels, giving information about home delivery services. I mean, there were home delivery services, but then a lot of people couldn't get on them, even though they were clinically extremely vulnerable. So that was very difficult. And then people were worried about their finances because they had to stop work, or their partner was shielding, so there was issues there, and we then the second one, so following up medical issues that hadn't been prioritized. We had one gentleman and his hearing aids weren't working. I mean, a gentleman in his 90s, and his neighbour had been doing shopping for them, but then they were shielding, and it was just really difficult. We couldn't get hold of him, and he couldn't speak on the phone or anything because nobody could do anything about these hearing aids. And my colleague had to go, and she was sort of standing outside his conservatory, waving her arms around, trying to get his attention, and just really difficult. And at the beginning, like we were saying, a lot of worry and anxiety, because people, I mean, and I think amongst staff as well. Certainly our psychology service offered support to staff who were really anxious about, because it was all new to everybody. We had quite a lot of people worried because hemodialysis shifts had to be reduced at one point. So people were, they've been told for years, right, you need to come 3 times a week, and then suddenly it was only twice a week. So that was a real worry for people. So, having to talk to people about that, and then obviously frightened if they did come in, as Sharon said, that they would catch COVID. Grief, we had supporting bereaved relatives, people who were bereaved by something else, but it was just extra difficult because of socially distanced funerals, and that kind of, just the stories about people sitting on their own, and that support network not being able to be there, and helping people apply for funeral grants and bereavement support payment, that kind of side of it. And then relationships again. I mean, people's situation changed, so they were spending a lot more time with their partner, with their family, and that did put a lot of strain on couple relationships and family relationships, as it did throughout society. Loneliness and isolation, loss of structure and routine in lots of people's lives caused low mood. Day centres were closed, all the sort of places where people would have gone. I mean, then there was, obviously people with children were trying to educate them as well, and all the difficulties with that, as were staff, of course, as well. I mean, conversely, the fact that people did keep with their dialysis routine helped some people keep sane. And one of our people who started on dialysis during the pandemic, a lady in her 40s, her mood really improved once she'd started dialysis because she felt less isolated. So, and then mental health, the final one on here, statistics show, and I mean, you'll know this, that people in deprived areas and living in poverty face the greatest risk of deterioration in mental health. And this was an issue that we found as well, and just much harder to get support. I mean, we had one gentleman who started dialysis during the pandemic, and it turned out his mental health had stopped before, and then he'd stopped taking his medication, and then the next thing he was on dialysis. And you kind of think, well, these are related. And then just trying to get the support back for him. Well, they'd closed all the, they'd closed all the cases of the people they could. So, but I say it had disastrous consequences for him. So it's the sort of consequences beyond, and somehow it seemed that all other illnesses were forgotten, and people still had to come to dialysis. They still had all these other difficulties. So yeah, a difficult time. And we found it difficult because we were doing much less face-to-face work, and it's so much. I mean, we're saying, the clues in the name, social work. It's so much easier when you're speaking to people face-to-face, and so that was particularly the first wave. But we've had lots of questions about vaccines and that kind of, so sort of similar areas to Sharon.
Okay, so what is counselling? So some of you may have had some counselling in the past or be going through counselling, but what is it? So as I've kind of said, it's a place to talk through for yourself what's going on, to explore what's truly going on for you without feeling judged, without having to think about what other people are going to say. It's your space. It's confidential, so it's confidential to the counselling team. There are some exceptions to that, but there'll be risk assessments, but it is very confidential, and it is a safe space. It's a place to talk, to be heard, to work through what's going on. And this picture down here with the 2 glasses of water, quite often what I say is, sometimes you can feel quite overloaded. You can feel that everything's overwhelming. There is no way that you can take anything else in. Anything else, there's just going to be this spillage. Counselling will be an opportunity to let some of that out, to give you a bit more space to think and feel and to work through what's going on for you, so it doesn't feel overwhelming, so that you can get back a bit more of the control. Because quite often there's that sense of not having any control, to be feeling quite helpless, and this will be a space to be able to do that. And we offer an hour, so it's an hour for you to talk through what's going on. Where else in your life do you get that 1 hour to just work through anything? It's very precious, and it's a very special place and time to be. We also offer some techniques. So it could be, with anxiety or with trauma, that whole kind of feeling out of control, just wanting to soothe and calm yourself down. So breathing is really important. And I cannot emphasize this enough. And a part of it is because when you're feeling anxious, you have you kind of breathe really shallowly. So that shallow breathing is telling the brain that actually there's something to be worried about. There's something to be frightened about. You're needing to be doing something. So it's continuing, it's perpetuating that feeling. So just by breathing, taking some really deep breaths, really expanding your lungs, as if you're blowing up a balloon. So really imagine that balloon being blown up. And then as you breathe out, that balloon comes in and the sides are almost touching. So just by doing those abdominal breaths, you're kind of telling the brain, actually, I'm okay. I can calm down. And if you calm the brain down, then you can start to think and feel at the same time, as opposed to being in that panic mode. Also, what I kind of really promote is the idea of the worry tree. So when you're feeling really anxious and you're worrying about so many different things, take each worry at a time. Is there something you can do about it? Yes or no? If yes, what can you do? When can you do it? If no, picture a stream that's flowing away from you. You pick up a leaf, you put the worry that you can do nothing about on that leaf on the stream, and you stay with it until it flows out of sight. So when it flows out of sight, that's a way of letting go of that worry. And you do that as often as you need to do it. So as many worries as you've got that you can do nothing about. And the more you practice this, you'll find yourself automatically doing it whenever you come across a worry. So that can help to reduce some of the anxieties that you're going through. But it's also about recognizing that, you know, sometimes life is really tough, and just accepting that. So from today's talk, I hope you've got a feeling that, you know, that there is support every step along the way. You don't have to go through this on your own. And it often feels like this, that you're on a cliff top. There's no way of going anywhere else but over. But actually there is help. You aren't alone. So working holistically, social workers, counsellors, doctors, consultants, you know, there is that support out there.
So yeah, and I think this is we're drawing near the end now. So just a summary really of the reason for having specialist renal social workers. I've mentioned before that we've got specialist knowledge, and this means that we can offer effective both one-off and long-term support to all renal patients, both adults and children. Social work these days is very much, you know, you do a task, you might be involved for a short time and then you close the case, but we just build up a relationship with people. It's you know, it's the relationship that's the most important thing. And we have lots of people who self-refer. We help them with something and then they'll come back a bit later with something else. And so it's just building up that relationship with them, with their families, and with the staff, as Sharon says. We can prioritize work and act quickly to offer urgent support. I mean, people, if they're waiting for a local authority social worker, they can often wait a long time. And, you know, waiting lists are getting longer, but we're based in the hospital. So we try to get to see people, you know, we can go down to the renal unit and see people, or wherever they are, contact them at home. So we try and get in and sort of avoid crises wherever possible, or respond to crises. You know, I mean, I saw somebody last week who's crash landed onto dialysis, a young man who's back at home living with his parents, just in a tiny place. It's far too small. And he was in a camp bed in the living room, just looking totally shell-shocked. But, you know, I went in with help with the housing application and doing all the practical things, and, you know, talked about referral to psychology, help with benefits, etc., and help for the family. I mean, mum's got health issues, stepdad's got mental health problems, so it's quite, you know, there's a lot there, but it's just breaking things down into tasks and getting, you know, and he started on dialysis, I think it was New Year's Eve, he was diagnosed, told to go straight to hospital, otherwise he wouldn't be here any longer. So, you know, it's getting in there quickly and just trying to make a difference when the problems are their most urgent. So existing links with the renal team and the hospital base make this much easier. You know, I mean, you just well, it's you go into the renal unit and get half a dozen referrals. I've just got one going down the corridor today, and it's like, and as I say, so it's that those relationships with staff and patients. We can follow up patients in the renal unit or at home, which that's quite different from the majority of the service, but there's a lot of people, and you can see a lot more when you see people at home and their situation. And as I said earlier, people is this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we call it. People will often open up and talk about their feelings once they've gained trust due to the practical support that we give them. So that's just a summary really of how we work and what we hope to achieve.
So you may be wondering where you can access support. So, first of all, we recommend going to your trust, but we do acknowledge not all trusts provide these, but some trusts have counsellors, psychotherapists, psychologists, welfare officers, social workers, care navigators, youth workers. But you've also got the charity that, like running the webinar today, that have their own helpline and peer support. You have other kidney charity, and you could also go to your GP to access counselling. So thank you for listening. I'm aware that, we have gone on for a bit longer than maybe we were meant to. So thank you for bearing with us. And now's your time to ask any questions.
Sharon, Margaret, thank you very much. And I think this sums it up. We've just got a message here, and it's just disappeared actually. Now you've just stopped sharing your screen. It said, very powerful stuff. Well done, NKF, for putting this together. It's been a very emotional time. Thank you very much for that. And we had a direct message also from Lou in Kent. So let me read this one to you. And it says, I'm chair of the Kent KPA. Where do you apply for grants to help patients?
Am I answering this one, or Kidney Care UK have a grant awarding system, and you can look on their website. They like to have a member of the renal team who supports the application, but yeah, you can have a look there and see, and they are very generous. They will help with all different, I mentioned about holidays. They will help with things like white goods, and if people have got, if they're having a particularly hard time financially, they'll give like sort of £100 a month for 3 months to help with living expenses and a variety of things. I mean, they've helped somebody who needed a laptop for for a business she was setting up, and so they're certainly worth approaching. And so if you do have a renal social worker or a care navigator, then they're probably the first person to ask for support with that.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Another comment here, or a question. After 21 years of a transplant, the anxiety of a kidney failing has got worse each year. How do I cope with this?
I think, that is a very difficult question, and recognizing that it isn't just immediately when it happens. It can come at any time. And I think, I would access counselling, recommend that, because you need to kind of work out where it's coming from. So what's triggered that, and it could be that it's coming from before your transplant, after your transplant, but it's just a time to explore that. And recognizing it, like I said, it can come at any time. It doesn't need to be immediately after transplant. So that is a good point. But I would recommend counselling. And like I said, if you can't access that through your service, then go to your GP and see if you can explore that, because it isn't something after 21 years that's going to go away unless you explore what's going on.
And I think people, like we were saying about people's lack of understanding in the general community, I think people think transplant is like plugging in a new battery, and once you've had a transplant, you'll be okay. I mean, I was involved in an assessment with a nurse, I have to say, and it was about whether somebody needed extra health funding for. It was a young woman with learning disabilities who needed a sitter with her on dialysis, and this nurse said, well, how long is she going to be on dialysis for? And sort of looked at her, well, it's 4 hours a time, 3 times. Well, yeah, but how long for? And she didn't understand that you were on dialysis until you either got a transplant or, and that was quite shocking, really.
I have another question here. It says, I'm a carer. How can I encourage my family member to access support?
I think, mentioning it. So if it's counselling support, if you're wanting them to receive counselling, they really need to want to have that, because there's not going to be any benefit to them, just telling them to go. But just kind of, I suppose, letting them know the changes that you've seen, and kind of wondering what is going on for them. So kind of opening up that communication of, how are you? I've noticed this, or, wondering what is going on for you, and what would you feel like if somebody was, if you were to get some support, what would you like? So kind of asking them what it is that they're wanting, and, planting the seed that there is counselling out there, or if it's other support. So if it is, for benefits or practical support, then, signposting them there, but just planting the seed that they don't have to do this on their own, that, there is support out there. And quite often people are unaware of that.
Yeah, and I mean, also there is support for carers, because local authorities have a duty to carry out carers assessment of needs. I mean, they often delegate that to the local carers centre. So there's a lot of support out there for carers, and so carers can, and often there's helpline where they can phone in, or they might have support groups. So it's the sort of issues that carers can discuss with other people in sort of similar positions. And then, if you feel that carer wants support, I mean, in our local authority, for instance, there's a sort of small grant that carers can get. It's sort of up to £300 a year. And again, people will sometimes come for a carer's review because they realise that the grant will be helpful. But obviously, while you're carrying out that review, you're finding out a lot of what's going on, and then being able to direct them to appropriate support. So it's kind of having that joined up approach again, I think, isn't it?
I'm not sure if you can answer this or not, but let's give it a try. Why is there not a standard level of support in all units?
We'd like to know the same thing. We desperately are fighting to get, equality of access. And, that's the other part of both of our roles, sort of. So apart from working, with clients and family members, we're also behind the scenes working on different groups, trying to promote that this should be, an equitable service. And, so at the moment there is something called the Renal Service Transformation Programme going on. And in that, we're trying to promote that there should be psychosocial support throughout. But it's about having your voice. So yes, we can do that. So we are behind the scenes trying to shout as loudly as we can that it's not fair. But, you as individuals can also contact your MP, contact whoever you can and ask, why isn't this being provided? This isn't fair, it's not right, and you want it.
Yeah, and this is the thing, that actually coming from the patients, they're much more likely to listen, and this is what, and there's a national psychosocial group that I'm a member of, a social work rep of that, and we're currently drawing up a manifesto to try and highlight all the issues and say what we think, because they're in similar areas like diabetes. There are, they've put forward a sort of plan for what they think would be an ideal service, and we need something like that, and cancer. But because renal is a sort of smaller area, you know, but equally, if not, well, obviously more important, it's the most important, isn't it? We all know that. So, you know, we're all working hard, but yeah, I mean, it is a mystery, but I think different trusts have, you know, they have different priorities and things develop historically, and you know, there might be somebody who's particularly interested in one area. I mean, some consultants are much more switched on to the psychosocial aspects than others. So it's trying to get that message across that it's absolutely vital.
Thank you,
And
Margaret. Right.
yeah, and it's just the bedrock. Yeah.
Let's have a couple more questions then, before we let you go. So this lady has put, I've been referred to counselling through my GP, but it's a 2-year waiting list. How can I find a renal counsellor, even if it's private?
Right, so yeah, so there are various counselling organisations. So I'm a member of the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, known as the BACP. So they have a website that you can go on and find private counselling, and you could search the area that you're in. But the idea, you know, what we're kind of trying to promote is that, yes, counselling is great. You know, I'm going to advocate that, but renal counselling is specific. So, you know, you get more kind of understanding and awareness from a renal counsellor than you would from a private counsellor. But yes, so it comes back to, you know, trying to get more equity of service throughout the country.
Fantastic, thank you. It doesn't look like there's any more questions. If I've missed any, I do apologise, but it looks like that is all the questions. I think everyone has been thoroughly interested in this talk, and thank you ever so much for everyone turning up, because we've had a massive response here. If you want to watch it again or tell your friends about it, we're going to put it on our YouTube channel, so we'll put that on our social media feeds tomorrow of the link, so you can watch it again. So spread the word, and also those people that didn't manage to get to it and registered, we'll email them and tell them about it. So thank you very much to Margaret and Sharon. You did a fantastic job, and we'll have another webinar in not next month, the month after. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much. It's been really good.
Yeah, it has. It's been lovely to see so many faces. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's very informative.
Thanks very much.